Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Moray House Trust and the Amateur Astronomers Association of Guyana, welcome to Astronomy in the Caribbean. For those joining us for the first time tonight, Moray House Trust is a private, non-partisan, non-profit based in Georgetown and dedicated to promoting Guyanese culture and public discourse. My name is Isabel de Caries. I am the Chair of Trustees at Moray House Trust and the moderator for this event. A warm Guyanese welcome to our regulars. Please note that the event is being live streamed via Facebook and YouTube. If you are on Zoom and would prefer not to be visible, please turn off your video. You can do that in the bottom left-hand corner of the Zoom screen. As I am quite probably the person here tonight who knows least about astronomy, the audience included, it seems prudent to leave any talk about that to the panel. It is, though, a particular pleasure to have on our panel representatives from a couple of the islands. The pandemic has perhaps catalyzed the sharing of common interests and concerns across our borders. And I sincerely hope that this is one thing that outlives the virus. So welcome to the audience, welcome to the panel. Our first presenter this afternoon is Dr. Shirin Haque, who is the 2020 Anthony Sabga Caribbean Awards awardee, rather, for excellence laureate in science and technology. She's the first woman to be awarded the CARICOM Science Award in 2018 and the former Deputy Dean in the Faculty of Science and Technology and a former Head of Department of Physics at the University of the West Indies. She's the Program Director for the Caribbean Hub in Radio Astronomy, and I'm sure she's going to tell us lots more about that. Dr. Haque, over to you.
Thank you, Isabel, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. One of the shortcomings, right, I got a couple of wave backs, but one of the real shortcomings is that we can't see you, but you can see me. So at this point, I'm going to start to share my screen because we have an amazing presentation about the magic and the beauty of the universe that you're going to see for the rest of the afternoon. So let me jump right into my segment. And okay, here we go. So the title of my talk this afternoon is "You Can't Eat a Telescope." Huh? All right, so you will hear the urban, is it an urban legend? What is this all about? So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my story. All right, sit back, relax. We have many decades to cover. All right, don't fret. This is just a short 15 minutes that I'm going to share with you. So I grew up in the Caribbean, and this is my story. I was always told that you can't do astronomy here. I was fascinated by the skies, and everyone around me told me that. And as you will see today, and as I learned, wrong, you can do astronomy in the Caribbean. Then I was told, you will never get any funding for astronomy. Wrong again. And then, of course, all around me was the buzz. You can't get a job with astronomy in the Caribbean. Well, you know how the story goes. Strike three. And then I got a job as an astronomer at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad. And then I heard, I wasn't directly told, I heard from a very reliable source, which was my boss actually at the time. And he said that in a meeting that was held where he was trying to obtain funding for what we were trying to launch, get a first research grade observatory in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, he was actually told, you can't eat a telescope. What does that mean? So I'm sure you've gotten the sense of what does that mean. It meant that, did astronomy carry any value in the Caribbean? we had bigger problems. We had to feed our nation. We needed food security. We had health, and of course today, this was many decades ago. There is COVID and all kinds of other problems. Why would we spend money on astronomy? Well, today I hope to be a myth buster and show you that you can. And if I have people in the audience, young and old alike, it's all fine, that you can do astronomy. And what the rest of the presenters, I'm so excited about their presentation, will show you. My part is the research part. Theirs is actually engaging in the beauty of the skies, whichever one takes your fancy. So we're going to uncover a little bit. It's nothing more than an appetizer of what we've been doing in the Caribbean here. So you have a question in front of you. What do black holes and life in the universe have in common? All right, can't use up too much of my time, right? Sounds like nothing. Guess what? Well, I stole a little adjusting it from my favorite hero and scientist, and I'm going to read. And those of you, some of you will recognize that. It's none other than the words from Carl Sagan with a little modification. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. It's the only world known so far to harbor life. The Earth, as Carl Sagan said, and I modified to, the Caribbean is where we make our stand. So what could we possibly contribute in astronomy? Where I did my PhD at the University of Virginia, the Department of Astronomy, there are 32 professional astronomers in one department. In the Caribbean, as it stands right now, there's one professional astronomer in the Caribbean right now. So how could we do anything? So let's look to our natural resources. The skies, the marvelous skies, is our natural resource. And because we are in the Caribbean, located close to the equator, we could see northern skies and southern skies. So folks, like I said, it's nothing more than an appetizer today. So meet some of my collaborators. And I'm there too, yes, very angry at the world, right? So you can guess who that is. So I went through this thing where I asked my collaborators for their baby pictures. And if we had more time, I'd have you guessing who is who. So these little kids and that little girl grew up several decades later to all meet up in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean. And we established the first research grade observatory. And what you're seeing there is SAT2. SAT2 stands for St. Augustine and Tuarla. So it's a collaborative project between Finland and ourselves. So that's Professor Valtonen. Let me just quickly get my pointer out here. Yeah, so that's Professor Valtonen, that's Professor Leto, and we lost this dear friend, but we also worked with him. So out here in the Caribbean, what is it that we do? So that telescope is dedicated to monitoring one object in the sky. And we can't ever do it alone. One of the messages that I hope that can reach everyone today is that we need everybody. So it has taken volunteers, it has taken my students and a team of us to actually make it all happen, for nothing but for the love of astronomy. So this is the story of OJ287. That's the system that we in Trinidad and Tobago are observing. And I think I saw some of my students in the audience. I saw Ariel. So some of them who work at the observatory may be in the audience there. And this is a monster system that there's data on going back over 100 years. And what we do is that when it can't be visible in the northern countries and there's an observing campaign, our team on the ground at St. Augustine starts to take over the observation. And Professor Valtonen, he comes in with the theory and he makes predictions that if this is a binary system, which has been confirmed, every time it cuts, the system flares. And then through the telescopes, that's what we look for. And to date, it has been on target. And that is a real vindication for general relativity. So if it was a talk on black hole, we'd say that what happens inside a black hole stays in the black hole. But humans with their intellect can even get beyond that. So we are even now being able to use this project to understand the nature of gravitational waves, because it's a system that is very, very it's a monstrous system. So the gravitational fields around it are very, very intense and can be a test for such. And we also had wonderful experiences. This is from a paper. So the pride that you feel, you see that little dot there? See that dot, that pale blue dot? That's Trinidad and Tobago. So the team on the ground here, my students and volunteers, we got data. Professor Leto was in the country then, and we actually were part of a publication in the historic Rosetta mission, which landed a probe on a comet. I just get so excited, and I have just a few more minutes to run this down. So what else? So what is there common about black holes and life in the universe? What's common is Trinidad and Tobago. So we also work on something that's called astrobiology, and that is trying to answer how can we solve or get an insight into some of the questions of life in the universe. What could we possibly contribute? Well, that looks like a Caribbean picture, right? A little juve, a little carnival, pitch and mud. But guess what? With the little mud and pitch, our party is a scientific venture. So I think in the audience, my husband is there, so he's out there with us on the. So we would be going hiking. So I got into astronomy thinking that I'll be nicely at home working on the computer with data analysis, but life and universe has different plans for you. And when the field of astrobiology just burgeoned, we were right there because of our natural resources of mud volcanoes and the pitch lake. So mud volcanoes, because you'll see in just a bit. So it's hiking, it's monstrous mosquitoes, and it's an adventure. And this is astronomy happening right here. So there are volcanoes on Mars, and there is methane, without getting too technical, on Mars as well. And that's what we find on the mud volcanoes here. So we use it as an analog to try to understand if you could find microbial life on Mars, or what the conditions are. These are just examples of some of the work that we would have published. So for those of you that are more technically inclined, I can always get this presentation to you and you can go through that. What were some of our findings? But we certainly got very interesting finding that in an extreme condition of mud volcanoes, we did find microbial life. And then there is, yes, Titan. Titan, since it's a talk on astronomy and not on mythology, is Saturn's largest moon. And what could that possibly have to do with Trinidad and Tobago? Well, on Titan, you have these hydrocarbon lakes. That's an actual picture from Titan. And guess where else in the world there is hydrocarbon lakes? Right here. So I know this is going all across the Caribbean. This is it has been organized through Guyana. But those of you from all around the region, come visit us. And this is one of the natural wonders. And there we are looking to understand how life originated and proliferates in the universe. So this is a picture of our pitch lake. There are very few in the world that are even accessible. So this makes us a very special place. So how do you do astronomy in a region with far less than a critical mass that you require? It's all about your natural resources. So this is again one of the publications. This was a huge thing for us. It was in Science, where it was found, we discovered that it was the manner in which microbial life proliferated was in these microhabitats, tiny little bubbles, extremely tiny, that they were able to grow and survive in. So again, because I want to stay within my time limit, those of you that are interested, there's a little bit more technical information here as to what are the conditions and what is it that we actually found. So suffice it to know that it takes a multidisciplinary team. Biology is not my thing, yet we do gene sequencing. So there are people in microbiology in our team, there are astronomers, there are geologists, and it takes all of us to solve the problem. Pitch is often used as a sealant because it is can keep water out. So the water activity is very, very low, far too low for life to actually survive. And we found that in our pitch lake, we found microbial life in these kind of conditions. And then just little prides and joy I share with you as I wrap up. It's nothing more than an appetizer to some of the work that we do here. Well, Trinidad and Tobago has been immortalized among the stars. So there was a campaign, and I'm the National Outreach Coordinator in the International Astronomical Union, and we named a system, an exoplanet and its parent star, Dingole and Ramajay. And those of you familiar with Trinidadian culture will understand its relevance. It's such a pride for me. So again, technical information if you're interested on the system we have. And yes, you are looking at a piece of a quilt. And what is the relevance of that quilt? Well, the Royal Astronomical Society celebrated their 200 years. And to recognize that, a quilt was made. So imagine the pride I feel. So this design represents the colors for Trinidad, exactly the position where Dingole and Ramajay is with reference to Leo. So it's there. So we can be small. It doesn't mean that we are invisible. Okay, so you can do wonderful things. And I really wrap up with our latest initiative where we are now the Caribbean hub for the through NRAO, National Radio Astronomy Observatory, through the National Science Foundation, and we are doing wonderful and exciting things. So you can be here with next to no funding, but we can make magic happen. So with that, folks, it's a wrap from me. It has been hell of a ride, and yes, I hope you noticed I'm dressed as Spock too. And as he says, live long and prosper. But if you're more on the Klingon side, I end with Kapla. Success to all. And over to you. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hack. And I have to say, I think if all the astral bodies were named things like Dingole and Ramajay, we'd probably stand a much better chance of remembering them. Thank you very much for that. We move now to David Marshall, who's the president of the Barbados Astronomical Society, an avid amateur astronomer. And his passion for astronomy was kindled by the passage of Halley's Comet in 1986. He is also going to, I think, talk a little bit about spectroscopy and photometry. You have to forgive my pronunciation there. No idea what those are. Anyway, over to you, David, to enlighten us.
Thanks, Isabel. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present this afternoon. While sharing is a really tough act to follow, I must admit, but I hope that my presentation this afternoon is going to be informative and enlightening, and it will open your mind to new possibilities for regional astronomy. So, okay, let the computer catch up. Okay, finally, gosh. All right, so astronomy, it always helps to be on a level playing field, and be on the same page when we're talking about the subject. So you can think of astronomy as the science dedicated to the study of celestial objects. And there are actually two flavors of astronomy. Observational astronomy, which involves the use of telescopes and cameras to view those distant objects and deep sky objects. And theoretical astronomy, which allows, it's really computational models these days. Long gone are the abacus and the pen and paper writing. You use computers, math and physics modeling to really get an understanding of the objects you're observing. You can see and appreciate that the two go hand in hand. What you observe, you want to be able to explain what you're seeing. And once those theoretical models are built, they should be useful in predicting future behaviors in those objects that you're seeing. And where necessary, refinements would be made to the models. And if the model is predicting something and you're not seeing it observationally, then either you may want to refine your observational methods, or you might appreciate that the model may need a bit of tweaking. So I'm gonna maybe take you down a path that should be familiar to several of you. It's part of my own personal experience, and I'm seeing it happen with many folk out there who are getting involved in astronomy. I guess it all starts with a fascination of space. You see a photo, you watch a video somewhere, or you may take your first views through a telescope, and you start to learn details about what you're seeing because you're curious. You want to know more about those objects. And that often leads to an investment of some form or fashion. You want to get your own telescope to see those things on your own. You may then have to go and buy eyepieces and filters to try to allow you to get the best views of those objects that you're looking at. Along the way, your skills will be developed. For those who use German equatorial mounts, you know the headaches involved with polar alignment. And in general terms, you may also want to know and understand what is the best times and methods to view targets. For example, when the planets are low to the horizon, you can see they wobble a lot because of the thickness of the atmosphere and unsteadiness. And us here in the Caribbean, we deal with a lot of haze, Sahara dust. So trying to view deep sky objects when there's a lot of haze around there is really pointless. But these lessons you learn along the way. Over time, you may think, okay, you may want to get more out of the equipment you're using. So that often leads to an upgrade of the telescope and the mount for the scope. Then the money really starts to be spent. So you want to get a camera to record what you're seeing. The setup may require guiding hardware to make sure that your imaging is all steady and you get those perfect images. And if you're using a monochrome camera, you may invest in a filter wheel, but these days the color cameras have really taken off in popularity, so it may or may not be necessary. And again, with that comes further skills development, because now you have to appreciate everything that's involved with processing those images that you're capturing to get the best looking photos. And then you end up sharing these aesthetically pleasing photos, you're satisfied with them, and you have that sense of achievement. And from there you say, okay, let me go on to image something else more challenging, because you appreciate that often the more challenging subjects, especially the deep sky objects, tend to be the most attractive in the end. However, here's the little issue that crops up. What you end up with is an astrophotographer with theoretical knowledge of celestial objects. And I'll explain why that is good and bad. The pros, well, yeah, an astrophotographer, those videos, those photos, those images that are generated by astrophotographers are invaluable to public outreach. It really captures the imagination of those folk who happen to view them. And also you appreciate that all along the way, the skills developed in capturing images is very useful for astronomical observations. But here's the catch. Many astrophotographers are not particularly interested in the true science of astronomy. Isabel referred to photometry and spectroscopy. Those sorts of sciences those are really methods that are used to analyze objects that we view in astronomy. Those aren't of particular interest to astrophotographers, and you understand why. I mean, the goal really is to capture an image, process it, make it look as beautiful as possible, then share it with others and get that satisfaction from that. But then along the way, with image processing, you often lose a lot of the detail that the science of astronomy really hopes would be preserved. I mean, you have a beautiful image in the end, but for science, the value is greatly diminished. And the long and short of it really is that astronomy requires astronomers. So what are we going to do? All right, so for me, I mean, I went along that path. I came to a point where I said, it's all well and good to have the beautiful images, but how do I actually participate in the science of astronomy? And if I were to do it all over again, I would say that early exposure to scientific observations, even using basic equipment, is useful to anyone starting out in astronomy. I mean, you appreciate what you're seeing, what you're observing, but in order to explain and fully understand what it is that you're observing, You really have to have that fundamental understanding of the scientific principles. It's not complex maths or physics that's truly required, and those of us who are familiar with it would appreciate it's not too complex. But even using basic things, basic observations, explaining, for example, why every 88 days Mercury is around the same part of the sky, so to speak, and you know, understanding why a sundial is not particularly useful if you have a vertical pole standing in the ground, that the pole really should be pointing towards Polaris, and that makes it a far more effective sundial to use. So those little details, even very early on, building that appreciation goes a long way. And then along with that, you take greater care in understanding that the telescope and camera that you're using are observational tools, and the results that you capture, you want to preserve them. They're an accurate record of what is captured, and the later analysis that might be useful for science, you don't want to lose in trying to, well, make the images more appealing to look at. There's a lot of science that you can get out of even some of the less attractive images. So I would also say too that when it's time to invest in new hardware, you can appreciate that astrophotographers, we often invest in, well, let's say the upgrade of the camera equipment tends to be the most pricey affair. The mount and telescope, you tend to keep for a long while. But then as astrophotographers go along, they believe they've outgrown the camera equipment that they're using in particular. Camera equipment can be relatively pricey. If the mindset is that you're actually in it for the science, then the $900 US that you would have spent in a new camera, for example, could instead be used for getting a diffraction grating for spectroscopy, or the photometric filters for photometry. I mean, the combination of those two that are listed there, I'll be generous, it's probably around 1/2 of the cost of a new camera. And if you're interested in the science, these are the things that you should be investing in. Then along the way, your skill set is actually tuned towards processing and analyzing the information that you can get out of those images that you're capturing. And the goal really is to have output that is of scientific value. Along the way, you learn how to properly reduce your raw data into information that is useful for science. And finally, and Dr. Hack mentioned this earlier, that appreciation of the need to collaborate, that is essential for scientific work. Cannot be overemphasized, because the reality is that data, in order for it to be shared, in order for it to be useful, it really needs to be shared. And the more collaboration you get in that respect, the better. And it is a shift in mindset from the astrophotographer role, because, you know, astrophotographers, you go out, it's often a solo effort. You go, you set up your equipment, you spend hours imaging, you come back in, you process your images, you share. And sharing is at the final end, you know, when you are satisfied with the final result. But with science and the world of astronomy, as an astronomer, you often have to share what you've captured, even at the point before you're doing any processing per se. You share the raw data. Depending on what you're trying to achieve in the end, you do just that. Now, here's an example that I want to share with you. Back in November 2019, I was part of a team with the American Association of Variable Star Observers, and we were monitoring that fainting spell of Betelgeuse. It gradually got dimmer, far dimmer than we would have expected it to be. Betelgeuse being a variable star, it would periodically brighten and dim, but I think it was actually October, mid to late October, astronomers worldwide noticed that it was dimming at a rate that it wasn't expected, and you know, people wanted to know what was going on. So it was myself and 25 other observers. We were monitoring Betelgeuse in the visual spectrum. Well, yeah, visual spectrum. And you know, I would have submitted my data on a nightly basis, and similarly, all of the other observers around the world. And we were able, and you appreciate the maths behind it, once you have several observations of magnitude, it's on the vertical axis, over time, the horizontal, you can see that trend. But when you have several observations, they are averaged out, and you get a really nice, smooth magnitude curve here. And we were able to successfully determine that We saw the magnitude of Betelgeuse bottoming out. We got no dimmer than magnitude 1.61, right around, it was between February 4th and 5th of 2020. So we were satisfied that that was as accurate as we could get given all the observations. And, you know, those results were in line with other observations made by other groups globally. So it's just an example of how information, how the data that you use, it needs to be shared in a collaborative spirit so that it can be ultimately useful to science. So the end result of all of this, you have a skilled and knowledgeable astronomer, which I think is, like I said, is essential for astronomy in the Caribbean. But there remains a challenge. We don't really have a framework for regional collaboration. At least I'm not aware of it. If such a framework exists, I can take my words and eat them right now, but in doing the search, it would be useful to provide a medium by which any astronomer in the Caribbean can say, look, I want to be able to do an investigation on something that's happening in the sky, and I need other people to work with. Who can I contact? Who's willing to work with me? Again, this time. So a collaborative framework would be essential to achieving this. And I've just set out a few objectives that I had in mind. Simple, general objectives. And it's really to share knowledge and expertise at the start. We could appreciate that astronomy in the Caribbean, it is developing. And the more we can benefit from each other's knowledge and expertise, the further along we will get in a relatively short period of time. So we already have simple multimedia communication tools at our disposal. This COVID experience has taught us this. It would be great to have a knowledge base so that, you know, even in the absence of someone to talk to, you can refer to the experiences of others and the sort of equipment and techniques that we use in a knowledge base. And I think what perhaps is also vitally important is that directory of amateur or professional astronomers, so that I would know anyone who's interested in doing that sort of collaborative work will know who to reach out to, how to easily contact them. And along with that, I would appreciate, I guess everyone would appreciate really, if there was mutual support for scientific and outreach activities. And this is on a peer-to-peer and a group-to-group basis. You could expect that Astronomical Society can reach out one to another if there's a really big celestial event to provide coverage, for example, across the region, because you'd appreciate that sometimes the view of that event is going to be different depending on locations. And we live in the Caribbean, you know what weather is like. And it'll help provide a more resilient approach to sharing and outreach and the scientific work that needs to be done despite the challenges that weather can pose. So that's really my view on how we can get there. And I'll leave you with this quote from Carl Sagan. Science is a collaborative enterprise spanning generations. When it permits us to see the far side of some new horizon, we remember those who prepared the way. In essence, the work that we do, it's not just for the here and now. We're actually laying the groundwork for future generations. And I think in the Caribbean context, that is ultimately the vision that we need to keep in mind. Astronomy has a place for everyone, and the region, I think, is apt and capable of providing the role that we know we can in the development of astronomy, and well, I think we are all interested in being a part of that. With that, I will end here, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for that, David. And I'm sure we can, when we get to the Q&A section, maybe just have a little discussion there about sharing information and sharing links regionally. At least we can make a start and take advantage of the situation. We move now to, I think it's Mahendra next, is it? Yes? I'm going to assume it's Mahendra, unless advised otherwise.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So Mahendra is from Guyana, and his interest in astronomy began at a very early age. Rather impressively, he built his own telescope. I hope you're going to tell us a little bit about that, from his home on the east coast of Demerara. And today works for Teleview, a leading manufacturer of optical instruments, including telescopes. So over to you, Mahendra.
Yeah, so my interest in astronomy did start from a young age. I think I was like 6 years old when I first saw the movie Apollo 13. And then my aunt told me that it was a true story. And I was like, what do you mean it's a true story? And, I never knew that the moon was actually another world. No one ever explained it to me that way. And that was the moment that my entire universe expanded. And growing up, I never had any kind of access to astronomy equipment. I could never afford a telescope. There was a lot of things I wish I had growing up that I just couldn't get. And the first time I actually looked through a telescope was when I was testing the first telescope that I made. I was 24 years old at the time. The mirror was not coated. I simply assembled the tube with the uncoated mirror, and I put all the pieces together. I put the focuser onto the tube. I put an eyepiece in, but the mount was not finished as yet. So I just propped the optical tube up on a chair, and I pointed it towards the moon, and I brought the image into focus. And I remember it vividly. And that was the first time I ever looked through a telescope. And that's when I knew that all the work that I put into making the scope, was correct, that I was doing the right thing. And a few months after that, I traveled to the United States, and I brought my mirror to be coated at an optical coating company in New Jersey. And if you look at, can you see the picture? It's on the screen right now. The picture on the left, was the first telescope I made, a 6-inch f6.5 reflector. And I made many observations with this telescope from my home in Guyana, including comet Lovejoy that passed through the solar system in early 2015. The telescope in the middle is a 10-inch f3 reflector that I finished in 2019. I had started making this telescope since in 2016. I started grinding the mirror back then, and I finished the assembly of it in January 2019, and I used it to image the lunar eclipse that took place on January 21st, I believe, 2019. And the telescope on the right is something I'm currently working on. It's a 6-inch f2.9 reflector. And it's actually the mirror from the first telescope that I ground down deeper to a deeper curvature to make the focal length shorter and the field of view wider. And I brought that mirror with me when I moved here to do my master's degree, and I worked on that telescope little by little. And recently I got the focuser to stabilize, because there's a lot of things I learned from doing astrophotography and from working in the amateur astronomy industry that enhanced my expectations of what a telescope should work like for astrophotography. And the stability of the components is very important. So I recently got the camera to stabilize in the focuser, and pretty soon I'm going to try to take a picture with it to see what it's going to be like. Now, I'd like to speak a little about astrophotography, why image the night sky. Now, astrophotography is a very specialized form of photography. David covered a little bit about that a few minutes ago. The data that you analyze, from doing astrophotography, doing long exposure photography, you can accumulate faint light to build up a bright image. Now, looking at objects through a telescope with your eyes, you cannot accumulate that amount of light to build up a bright image. You have to look at the object real time. but with astrophotography, you can accumulate faint light to build up a bright image. You can identify moving objects from frame to frame. If you take multiple exposures over a certain period of time, you can analyze frame to frame to see if any objects are moving. That's how the planet Pluto was discovered by Clyde Tombaugh. You can use filters to isolate individual wavelengths of light in an image. And each wavelength would relate to a certain element that is in the object that you're observing. So by doing that kind of imaging, you can determine what kind of elements are present in a nebula or in a galaxy. And from imaging the night sky, you can also image wavelengths of light that are not visible to the naked eye. And this is something a lot of people don't know, and it's something I wish I knew earlier. Now, I'd like to get into an image that I took sometime last year. There's a lot of things I learned from taking this image. This is a very wide view of two nebulae in the constellation of Cassiopeia. This is the Heart and Soul Nebula. The Heart Nebula on the left, because it has that shape like a heart, and the Soul Nebula on the right. The width of this field of view is approximately 12 full moons across, 12 full moon diameters across. Now, a lot of people wonder, if these things are so large on the sky, how come we don't see them? We can see the full moon, but how come we don't see these objects if they're so wide? And it is because the light from these objects are very faint. And not only that, some of the wavelengths that are coming from these objects cannot be seen by the naked eye. They are not in the visible, they're not a visible wavelength. Now, what is your favorite wavelength? I had a conversation recently with one of my housemates where I was explaining different wavelengths of light and what we can see and what we can't see. Take, for example, if I set up my telescope in my driveway to image, and it's pitch black out there, and I look out at the driveway from inside my house, I can't see my car, I can't see the telescope because it's so dark. Does it mean that those things are not there? But if I look outside with an infrared camera, I can see the objects there. But why can't I see with my bare eyes? It's because the light that is there are not visible to my naked eye. So all I see is darkness. Well, something similar is going on in the sky. There are wavelengths that are coming down from the sky that you cannot see. Growing up, my favorite color was always red. You ask anybody about my favorite color, they tell you it's red. If people ask me if they want to get me a piece of clothing as a gift, they ask me what's my size, I would say my size is red. So I was extremely excited when I found out that the sky is awash in H alpha wavelength. H alpha is the 656.281 nanometer wavelength. That is the wavelength of light that is emitted by ionized hydrogen. And that picture of the Heart and Soul Nebula, the reason it has so much red in it is because it's dominated by ionized hydrogen. And that's why there's so much red in it. So my housemate told me maybe it's more accurate to ask people what is their favorite wavelength, because what you can see and what is there are two very different things. When I was little, I remember asking people this question that I found strange, like, how do we know that the colors that we see are the same colors that everyone else sees? And everyone thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was crazy. And then I grew up a little more. People told me it's a philosophical question. And then recently I met people who said they have a problem differentiating certain colors like yellow and green, two colors that are very close on the visible spectrum. And they cannot, see the contrast between these two colors, but I see them very clearly. Perhaps in their vision, the red and yellow and green are not very saturated in their eyesight. So maybe it's better to ask people what is their favorite wavelength as opposed to what is their favorite color. It might be more scientifically accurate. So I've narrowed down my favorite wavelength to 3 decimal places. Here we have a depiction of what the electromagnetic spectrum looks like from high energy gamma rays to low energy radio waves. And as you can see, the visible spectrum is a very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, people have a way of saying that that astro images are photoshopped, and we'll talk about that just now. But if we only did visible light astronomy, we'd be missing out on so much information that the universe has to offer. That's why every set of wavelengths in this graph, the gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, infrared, radio waves, each one of them are studied in a very specialized area of astronomy. Usually, huge dishes are used for studying radio waves, and high precision reflective mirrors and glass lenses are used to analyze visible light. Here are two images of the Milky Way, our Milky Way galaxy. They look a little different. The one on the right was taken by myself at a dark sky site in Maruca, Guyana, back in 2017. The bright star close to the left of the to the right of the center of the image with diffraction spikes across it, that is not actually not a star. It's the planet Saturn. It was passing the plane of the Milky Way in July of 2017. The picture on the left was taken by Trevor Jones of Astro Backyard. He used a camera that is sensitive to H-alpha light. That's why you can see more red in his picture. The picture that I took was with a stock DSLR, and it had a infrared filter in a stock DSLR, and it blocks out that H-alpha wavelength, making a stock DSLR a bit unsuitable for certain objects in the sky. So nevertheless, I still got a decent image of the Milky Way. And this whole thing about the IR cut filter blocking the H-alpha light, I didn't know anything about it at that time. But I recently learned these things, and I modified my own camera, my own DSLR, the same DSLR that I took this picture with. Last year, when I was at home and everything was, all the businesses were closed, you couldn't go anywhere, I started to tinker with my equipment. And I removed the sensor and I removed the infrared cut filter. You can see it there in the upper part of the picture. The glass actually broke when I was trying to remove it. And that's how I astro modified my camera. And I went on to use that camera to take a lot of images of deep sky objects that were rich in H-alpha light. Are astrophotos photoshopped? Yes, of course they are. It's a form of photography. And from what I've explained just now, there's a lot of light in the sky that you cannot see. And people tend to think that a picture that they get on their camera phone is the true color, but they don't realize that a phone, any camera, does a lot of processing before it shows that picture to you on the screen. So was that photo photoshopped? Was that photo edited? Every photo, every digital photo is edited in some form or the other. And astrophotography is what I like to call a space age hobby. You're not going to see anything without applying some technology, and Photoshop and many other processing tools have become instrumental in processing astrophotos. And people think that astrophotos, you know, they have less meaning because they're photoshopped. But like I said, some of these wavelengths cannot be seen by your naked eyes, and you're not going to see anything unless you apply some technology. Here is a picture of the pillars of creation. This image was taken by Hubble back in the 90s, I believe. And it shows, it uses what is called the Hubble palette. It's an RGB image, but the red, green, and blue channels were composed of light taken at different wavelengths. This kind of astrophotography uses a monochrome camera. Now, monochrome cameras are far more sensitive than color cameras because they can only image one wavelength at a time if you use the narrowband filters. Now, the red channel uses the sulfur data, the green channel uses the hydrogen data, and the blue channel uses the oxygen data. And by isolating each one of these channels and then combining them together, you can make a very high contrast image. And from looking at this image, you can tell exactly where the sulfur is, exactly where the hydrogen is, and exactly where the oxygen is. And that can be pretty useful if you're studying the molecular makeup of a nebula or any deep sky object. Here is a photo that I took recently using a small 85mm refractor. I imaged this target over 3 nights. I collected a total of 10 hours, but I had to delete some of the data because they had satellites moving through them. So I was left with 8 hours, 54 minutes of exposure. And this object is called Markarian's Chain. It's a cluster of galaxies in the constellation of Virgo. And it has a lot of massive galaxies of different shapes and sizes. There's galaxies colliding and interacting. And I was able to see a lot of things in here. Well, from all this data that I collected, I was able to see a lot of small objects that I never knew were there before. This is a NASA APOD image that was posted recently, and they zoomed in to the jets that are coming out of the black hole at the center of Messier 87, which is the galaxy on the lower right-hand corner of this Markarian's Chain image. And I zoomed in to my image of M87, and I was able to see a few pixels that show the jet. I had no idea that this kind of resolution can be achieved with an 85mm aperture refractor. And this is the kind of thing that I do in my imaging. I use telescopes from my job and I try to push their performance to see what I can get out of them. Now, this is the setup that I'm going to be using the next time the sky clears here. It's an NP-127IS. It's one of the best refracting telescopes in the world. And I recently brought it home from my job. I found it up in the attic and I figured I'll use it to do some imaging. I made a guide scope using lenses, some old blemished lenses that I found. And I 3D printed the rest of parts and I assembled them together. And I use a control system called StellarMate. It's pretty cheap and it does a lot of things. It can automate an entire night's imaging. And I usually set this up in my driveway. I find my target, I start imaging, and I go to bed. And when it's time to pack up, I go out and I pack up and I bring everything back inside. And astrophotography does not have to be expensive. This is the setup that I used to image the Milky Way. That Milky Way photo that I showed earlier, this is what is called a barn door tracker. I made it with 2 pieces of plywood, a pair of hinges, 2 pairs of hinges, and a bolt that I bent into a curve. Now, I did some calculations, and the little white disc that you can see on one of the boards there, a nut is glued onto that disc. And when that disc is turned at a certain rate, it moves the bolt, and the bolt moves the upper part of the barn door tracker where the camera is mounted. And that red line that points to N is north. That line represents the North Celestial Pole, which has to be aligned with Polaris. And by turning the disc at the correct rate, the camera can be turned to counteract the rotation of the Earth, keeping the image of the Milky Way stable on the image sensor. So I was able to take 10, 30-second exposures to build up that image of the Milky Way. So, imaging doesn't have to be expensive. You can do it using very simple equipment, such as this. So I'd like to wrap up by saying I had no idea that so much scientific astronomy was going on in the Caribbean. And I really had no plan to get this involved in astrophotography, even though, I made my own telescopes and so on. I just did it as a hobby, but I am going to continue to do so. Sometime in the future, I hope to build a remote observatory in Guyana that I can control from here. And hopefully it'll be a telescope of my own making. Onto this day, I've never actually bought a telescope. And yeah, I'm looking forward to see what this group is going to produce in the future.
Thank you, Mahendra. Thank you very much. Ferlin, could you stop the screen share for 1 second? That was absolutely fascinating. The French call it a bricoleur. So this is, we need more of this attitude in the Caribbean of just, there was a gentleman who, a doctor who gave a presentation many, many years ago and talked about appropriate technology. So if we don't have it, we make it. I mean, it was just wonderful to see that, that whole approach. And I love that you haven't, that you're in the land of gadgets, but you haven't bought a telescope yet. Fantastic. Thank you. Very, very interesting. We move now to Ferlin, who was the founder, or is the founder, of the Amateur Astronomers Association of Guyana, and coordinates activities and events to promote astronomy in Guyana. I'm going to hand straight over without further ado. Thank you. Ferlin.
Yes, thanks a lot, Isabel. Let me just get the screen back up. There we go. Now, yeah, I am very, very amazed by the quality of these presentations. They definitely went way beyond my expectations. Thanks to Dr. Hack for her exceptional overview of astronomy, actual astronomy that presented what's happening in the Caribbean region. Special thanks to David for giving us an excellent summary of what astronomy, amateur astronomy, and astronomy in general is like, and what it would take to kind of be engaged in the topic, as well as giving us a brief overview of astrophotography. And to Mahendra for sharing his story, his very unique story, having to build his own telescope, in a country that generally doesn't appreciate much of the night sky, I would say. But the purpose of my presentation is to kind of bridge that gap of try to encourage people to become, at least in Guyana, to become more appreciative of the night sky. And which is why I kind of put together this little project I called the Amateur Astronomers Association of Guyana. So I just want to briefly give the audience an overview of what we're about, and probably give a sketch of where our destination or what it is that we plan to do in Guyana. Our overall mission as an astronomy club, a local astronomy club, is to, well, simply promote astronomy in Guyana. And we hope to expand the promotion efforts within the region, the Caribbean region. I'm very thankful to have met so many people over the years of being in this, what I would call a hobby at first, to have met them, to have discussed on so many topics. Some of them are actually in this talk as well, and in the audience. So we're all about just promoting astronomy and try to instill some sort of inspiration for especially people and younger people, kids especially, to become interested in astronomy. Now, the grand question of why would you want to promote astronomy in Guyana? You can say that Guyana already has so much going on? Why why just be burdened by this? Well, I think astronomy is a special subject. I consider it to be, I'm sure everyone who's on the panel would agree, that it's the ultimate STEAM subject. Astronomy, it taps into real science, it taps into art, it taps into creativity. David and Mahindra spoke about the photography aspect, and that is very strongly influenced by both science and artistic endeavors. So with photography in particular, you can create your own, specific way of how you want to represent a particular object in the night sky, whether it be a galaxy, a planet, or a nebula. And even philosophy, astronomy, believe it or not, is enriched with philosophical content. In fact, if we go way back in history, we'll discover that the ancient peoples or distant ancestors from many civilizations across the world have expressed some sort of connection between the night sky and human beings. They've associated astronomy with life, the meaning of life, the significance of existence. So it's a very, I would say, ancient topic, astronomy, and it's evolved so rapidly in the last 200 years, thanks to so many scientific progress globally. But now we are seeing that even the Caribbean region, we can add to that. I want to say that when it comes to the organization, we started back in 2015, just like a regular group session meetup. We would meet, Mahindra and I would meet, and some other folks who were interested on the ground. We would meet at maybe a cafe, or we arranged a session at my place or someone else's place, and we just engage in astronomical conversations. We talk about telescopes, which is fun to talk about. We talk about space objects and what's happening with NASA and SpaceX, things that you can't really express, in a country that's dominated by, let's just say, politics. We're not currently legally registered, but we do plan to register as a society soon in Guyana. We have 4 members that make up the organizing body. These include individuals, myself, Mahindra, Athar, and Ariel. Some of you may know of them. Athar I think Athar was the former University of Guyana Astronomical Society president. And so he served some time there at the University of Guyana. In fact, now that I mentioned it, for those of you who are UG students, definitely I would encourage you to check out the university's astronomical society there. They do have engaging content, and we've collaborated with them in the past, so definitely check them out. Now, this is just a little picture of, put some faces with the names. Athar there, you can see on the far right of the screen. Ariel is in black, centered there. The young lady in red, Renuka Prasad, she was the winner of our art competition, our first art competition, where we give away an 80 millimeter telescope, refracting telescope, for free. So the only thing she had to do was just compose a very lovely artistic piece with a sort of Guyanese theme. In this case, she used a jaguar looking out to the night sky, which is kind of neat. And my wife, Krista Bisnot, who helps support the endeavor, strongly committed. I appreciate her. So Athar Khan is our program coordinator in Guyana. So if you have inquiries locally there in Guyana, or maybe you reside internationally and you would like to help out, pitch in, whatever way you can, we appreciate all efforts. Athar is our guy. If not, you can always reach out to me. Ariel Bailey also is our assistant coordinator. She is a fabulous young lady who can answer most of your inquiries concerning partnership and collaboration. And of course, Krista Bisnat, who helps out. Our website is aaagy.org. So if you go to our website, you'll find a lot of content there. Highly encourage you to check it out. We have educational resources. Every month we try to keep up to date with a sky map so that you can see what constellations are up in the night sky right now. You'll see like a little weather kind of graphic there that tells you, what's the weather condition for today and the week ahead, so that, if it's a good time to look up, you can definitely check out our page there. There's an educational section and a membership form section that you can go check out. If you want to become a member, it's absolutely free. You do that there on our website. Now, our work, Mahindra and I, we've been doing photography of the night sky in Guyana over the past several years. Prior to Mahindra moving to the United States and myself, we were very much engaged in photography while in Guyana, and we still do when we go and visit. So, we have telescopes there that we use. Sometimes I take like my own specialized photography equipment there and take some photos. We've been featured in Guyana Times newspaper. We've been on public radio stations. I did an article for the Intellectual magazine, which is run by Dr. Hack, who is one of our panelists here. So in that magazine, it's freely available. Just Google it. You can find a link to it. But in the latest feature, you'll find that I talk about astronomy in Guyana and astrophotography in Guyana. So it's something that you might want to check out. The association is, we're registered and we partner with Astronomy Without Borders. It's a global organization of astronomy clubs. It's very enriching and very lively. So we have like an obligation to sort of compile reports annually on what sort of activities we engage in Guyana. So you can find that on Astronomy Without Borders to see what we've been up to. We are officially registered with Sky and Telescope magazine. So if you're looking up on Sky and Telescope magazine, which is a world-renowned astronomy magazine, you can find us there as a club to connect with if you're interested in astronomy. In fact, we've had several people from around the world connected to us through this website because they see us registered there. And we engage frequently with the Amateur Astronomers Association of New York. I am a member of this association. They're very active and very busy, and they're very friendly as well. So whenever they have like a free lecture available for the public, we share it within our group. Our group gets access to that, our online Facebook group, so they can engage in free lectures in astronomy. And we're also looking to partner with CARINA, the Caribbean Institute of Astronomy. They're the regional hub for astronomy associations. So, we hope to be registered with them eventually. Now, some of the activities that we do in Guyana, we do public star parties and outreach events. Some people in the audience might have seen some of our ads on social media. We've done star parties at, like, for instance, the Rupununi Arts and Festival event. We've been there. And we do our own thing as well, usually at the Seawall in Georgetown, but we're looking to expand as well. We give free online courses in astronomy and even philosophy of science, which is also important and connects well with the overall theme of astronomy. But you need to be a registered member and be part of our Facebook group. If you're not like a Facebook person, that's fine. We can add you to a mailing list, which we're currently working on, so that you get like the link to connect to these courses. We do annual competitions in art, poetry, and essay writing. We believe that creativity and writing, very important things in Guyana. And you wouldn't believe it, but we've received so many exceptional pieces of, in art poems and essays on different topics and themes I would highly encourage you to check those out. They're on our website under our blog session. People who win in these competitions, they get a free telescope. I mean, you know, there's nothing greater than a free telescope. Telescopes are expensive, but we try our best to make it publicly available. And that's the little that we can do. We do it. So far, we've given out 6 telescopes valued at approximately 70,000 Guyana dollars. And these are beginners type telescopes. They're suitable enough for planetary and observation and observing the moon. We've given out 2 binoculars in the process. We have competitions designed specifically for adults and kids under 16 years old. So we kind of diversify our content so that everyone can get a sort of fair share in the process. With our free membership, you get a cool digital badge, which you can take away, print, and tell people that you're a member of the Amateur Astronomy Association of Guyana. What I'm going to do now is just briefly show you. Mahendra showed you a few of his incredible shots of very prominent night sky objects. I'm just going to show you shots specifically that I've done while in Guyana using my equipment that I purchased. I didn't make my own telescope. I give Mahendra full credit for doing that. I purchased equipment, put them together, all the technical bits and pieces so that I can get shots like this. This is just a shot of the moon. I did a lunar eclipse shot by its phases, as you can see in this one. I'm not going to spend too much time on these because I know we're kind of behind time, but just to give you a brief slideshow of the sort of photography that you can do in Guyana. And like Dr. Hack mentioned, Guyana, the Caribbean region as a whole is a very special place because of their position along the equator. Guyana, aligns perfectly there at the equator. We get the best of both worlds, the northern and southern hemisphere. You can't go wrong with living and looking up and looking up in the night sky in Guyana. I've taken planetary objects that you can see there with my telescope and equipment here. And Mahendra talked about experience and how experience can help develop your skill in photography. Believe it or not, when you take a single photo of the night sky, there's always room to improve. And this little shot that you see here shows my improvement over time. On the far left was the very first shot that I took of the Great Orion Nebula located in the Orion constellation. This shot was taken at my parents' house on the west bank of Demerara. Because where I was, I didn't have some like good skies. I had a lot of light pollution. So light pollution washed away the blackness of the night sky. But at my parents' place on the West Bank, I was able to get shots like this. The middle one is just a retake of the same object, but I kind of, think you develop a bit better. The one on the far right is my best shot I've ever taken of the Great Orion Nebula while in Guyana. This was taken at the back of Kurukuru village up the Linden-Suzanne Highway at a campsite called Camp Kabayak. I would definitely recommend checking them out. They're fantastic people. They love people to go on their campsite. So you can find them on Facebook and connect with them. Beautiful skies, just gorgeous. Absolutely recommend, taking a trip up there. The shot on the lower bottom there, that's the very first shot photo I've ever taken of the night sky or an object in the night sky. This was taken with a smartphone that I had back then through the lens of my telescope. I did a 5-second exposure using my cell phone. And wow, I mean, that was pretty impressive at the time. And in fact, I don't know why, but that picture got more likes on social media than my best picture. But I guess people kind of are thrilled with the whole adventure prospect. This is another object, a series of objects that, it's a trio of galaxies. This is the Leo triplet, as we call it, located in the constellation Leo. There's three prominent galaxies there, sort of clustered together, so they're very close in proximity. So I got this shot this is just a 10-second exposure from Camp Kabayak at the back of Kurukuru there, up the Linden-Suzac Highway. So, I mean, you know, these objects are very much real. I remember a guy asked me, you know, do you believe that those images from NASA are real? Like, they got to be making that stuff up. The guy never looked through a telescope. At the time, I didn't look through a telescope. But when I got my telescope and started to do this kind of thing, yeah, they're very real. So, you know, there's no doubt. I absolutely recommend that if you can get a chance to look through a telescope, do it. This is a shot I took of the Andromeda Galaxy from my balcony on the east coast of Demerara, where I used to live. Yeah, this is just a 10-minute exposure shot. Not a single shot, but multiples of 10 seconds stacked together. They kind of compress together and they make one shot. So I got a lot of details with this one. This is a beautiful capture of the Andromeda Galaxy. Now, that's it for my presentation. So like I said, if you're interested in astronomy, you want to you know, join us, join the foundation and kind of assist and participate with our group activities, please do so. Don't hesitate. We welcome everyone. Yeah, we're gonna make you like and appreciate the night sky more. Thanks a lot.
Ferlin, thank you so much for that. Again, fascinating, and what beautiful photos. I've seen lots of comments in the feed, and so I'd just like to go straight into open up the floor if anyone's got any questions. We have got some people on Facebook, and if there are any questions there, we will relay them. If you'd like to ask a question, you can do it through the raise your hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or you can ask a question in the chat, whichever you prefer.
If I may, Isabel, there's just one announcement I forgot to mention, and it's a very important announcement, in fact. This event, we're actually giving out a telescope. So, you know, in order to get that telescope, you have to ask a very intriguing question to any of our panelists. It must be so intriguing that, you know, our panelists will say, that's a gorgeous, excellent question.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Well, that will probably put everyone on the spot as to, you know, whether they're going to manage with the. But has anyone got a normal question in the interim, or did any of the other panelists want to comment while we're waiting for the questions to come in?
Well, I would say that Mahendra's presentation, in terms of that skill involved in building telescopes, that is one that, I mean, I've never seen that sort of skill set in the Caribbean. And I think that is, well, testimony to the potential that this region has. I mean, when you home build a telescope, and I noticed the focal ratios that you were using, fast focal ratios, which tend to be difficult to, you know, actually successfully build a telescope around that. That is impressive. And, you know, it would be great to see that sort of skill shared with other persons in the region. I mean, as you said, it does drive down the overall cost significantly. And you also mentioned 3D printing parts, which is now another means by which the overall cost of building your own equipment can be driven down. So I am impressed. I am impressed, and I want to see more of that sort of work, that sort of technical ability developed in the Caribbean.
Yes, I see we've got a question from Ronald.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. It's just a question that's always bothered me. Don't you think the wormhole, sorry, the black hole is actually, true, the black hole is actually a link to other galaxies? Don't you guys believe that? Could it be a wormhole, like, a link to other galaxies far, far beyond our capabilities of actually seeing and studying? It's just a thought that's out in my mind.
Dr. Hack, are wormholes possible?
Yeah.
Let me take that. And I wouldn't resist the urge to say that's a really great question. We didn't prearrange this. Yeah, so that is really actually a great question. So what happens is that you can say at the center of black holes, there's something called, well, they call it a singularity. And I often say singularity is a word they use, physicists and astronomers, when we don't fully understand what's going on, because you get things go to infinity and so on. So there is a model that says that through a black hole, you can emerge into another space and time through a white hole. So these are, they are mathematically possible, but not observed as yet.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question in the feed to Dr. Hack from, I think it's Devas, saying, how are links with the IAU benefiting astronomy in the Caribbean?
Yeah, so one of the things, actually listening to the presentations this afternoon, sometimes my heart bleeds with what we are capable of, but literally as islands separated by sea, we are sort of working in our silos. So I hope, and I'm putting the charge to Mahindra, UGAS, and Karina, and all the people who are out here to unite us together. So to the question that was asked, that's the International Astronomical Union that the person is making reference to, and connecting with them, we have been able to collaborate internationally in many aspects. So there's the outreach aspect, and what we're currently doing is actually bringing astronomy inclusivity for those that are blind and visually challenged. We are now trying to take astronomy to them, so you can see what a visual science it is. So how do you bring that to them? So you can convert the light into sound. So there's a piece of equipment, and Mahindra, you are so excellent with equipment. I could send it to you that you can actually build that. When you hook it up to a telescope, persons who are visually challenged can actually hear the sound and therefore appreciate the beauty of the night sky as well. It's just one of the projects.
Wow,
That's nice.
amazing. Okay, we've got a question from Frederick Collins. Frederick?
Yes, good evening all. It's an observation and a question, but more observation. And I heard the Mahendra saying that he came from the West Bank, and described earlier the situation where he had never heard that the moon was an actual place. There's a certain irony in it, because 40 years before, I don't know, counting 1969, it was during just before the first moon landing. As a teacher, I taught my primary school students that the moon was, and that was a good fortune. And so the question arises as to, well, how do we get all of this great attitude where people are not just going to university to learn to make money, but are going after knowledge for knowledge's sake, and making it, how do we transform that into a culture in the Caribbean? For example, just check on the Ramanujan story. It's there on the net. He was poor, and yet he made such a great impact. There's a documentary about him. How could we transform this nascent interest and this great effort I'm seeing here into a wider culture in the Caribbean? That's the question.
David, can you comment on that?
David, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, I was thinking, even as I was preparing the presentation, the whole matter of collaborative efforts. I think that, all right, you see, it is actually paired with the reality that there are some countries in the Caribbean that have stronger ties with these sort of international resources that allow, I said, there's a change of culture. Culture will change when you have exposure to the possibilities. I think, Dr. Hack did say that we unfortunately are separated by water. Granted, these days that should not be a challenge. We have the technology that should bridge us. And it's that experience, the sharing of experience and knowledge from those countries that may have more resources in the area to others that may have the interest, but may not have necessarily the resources to pursue astronomy as a science. I think that is the real challenge that has to be overcome. Part of it too, I would say, it's really to fine tune what astronomy is all about, right? If you want to speak about knowledge in the area, I don't think we can afford to be distracted with other pseudosciences that seem to get in the way. And that is a challenge even within my society, to stay focused on what astronomy really is all about. It isn't about UFO hunting. Astrobiology is a definite science, and Dr. Hack can speak volumes about that. But the search for extraterrestrial life, let that have its own place. Let's focus on astronomy. And, I think in that way, you would then focus your efforts on developing the knowledge about astronomy, sharing the science and the skill set around it. That is where we need to be. And like I said earlier, I was really inspired by Mahendra's work. Exposure of that sort of work to the region, knowing that, yes, it can be done. We have someone in the region who can do this. So there's nothing really keeping us back from doing the same. Those are the sort of concepts that cross my mind. I hope it helps to answer the question, but it is a challenging question, is a challenging matter that needs to be addressed, but everything is small steps.
Thank you. We have two similar, I see Vanda waiting with a question, but we have two similar questions in the feed, which maybe we'll just tackle now. One from Vidyarata Kisoon. Given that there is a Karina, why are there still challenges with regional collaboration? And then one from Krista Sadana. If the Caribbean is a great place to do astronomy from, why isn't it more popular as national and regional initiatives, for example, in schools and, people following this as a career?
I wanted to add something.
Oh,
so
sure.
what David was saying just now about getting people to pursue what they're passionate about and, bringing out the talent that is in the Caribbean. Now, I came across something very peculiar when I was doing my master's degree at the City College of New York. I was a teaching assistant and I was teaching students how to use the software called SolidWorks, which I use to design parts that I 3D print. Now, they had to choose a mechanical part and analyze the stresses in the part. And I was confused when people would choose things like a spoon or a clothes hanger, or a hook on a wall, that kind of thing. Because what I told them was that in the field of engineering, and especially in astronomy, nobody comes in because they want something to do, right? People come into these kind of fields because they're passionate about it, right? People go into engineering because they saw rockets launching into space. They saw huge bridges. They saw some kind of technology that fascinated them. So if you're given a chance to choose what kind of part you want to analyze, why not do something that brings out the passion in you? And, I didn't become an engineer to learn how to design a spoon, right? So, and I wish I could tell people that I got where I am because I had some plan. I didn't, because all I was doing was what I was passionate about. When I couldn't get a telescope, I built one, right? And I did it just as a hobby. I also felt that that I could not eat a telescope on some level, but that's why I just did it as a hobby. And in Guyana, I was an engineer working in the heavy machinery industry. So I had a job that made me money, and then I used that money to pursue my hobby. I didn't expect to make a living out of my hobby. And then when I came to the United States and I finished my master's degree, as luck would have it, a friend of mine knew the president of Teleview Optics, and he told the president of Teleview Optics, David Nagler, that he knows this guy. He's graduating. He's built his own telescope before and that kind of thing. And that's how I was able to get a job in the optical field. But I had no grand plan. I wasn't in pursuit of money or anything like that. I would say, no simpler than a dog following his nose. I simply did what I was passionate about. And I believe if people would just do that, then they would bring out their own talent. I believe everybody is talented about something, but somehow society and social media makes them feel as though they're not. Everybody is talented at something, and you just have to keep following what you're passionate about. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. Thank you. Did Dr. Hack or David or indeed Ferlin want to attempt to answer the other two questions about Karina and
Yeah, let me just, I just wanted to add a little thing. Over my decades working in the Caribbean, what I've realized, as opposed to what you find in other countries, let's say northern countries and so on, is that you tend to have single champions in the Caribbean. And if they leave, it dies. Mahindra, you would have loved to meet my late colleague. He had a machine shop. He built a 12-inch telescope in Grand Cayman, set up a solar observatory, and did the most fantastic astrophotography there. And he passed away a couple of years ago, and now it's finished. It's finished. So those are some of the challenges we experience. But I still want everybody to know that we have still been pressing on forward. In 2017, we held the first ever regional astronomy conference we held it in Trinidad, and there was a big team from Guyana. 6 people came from Guyana, and it was really quite good. We had from Barbados and Honduras and Jamaica, everybody. It was so good. The second one was held in Grand Cayman in 2018, and right now the COVID has slowed us down, but we're hoping to hold the third one in Puerto Rico.
wonderful.
So
Any other comments about those two questions? I'll go over to Vanda if not. Okay, Vanda, did you had a question?
Hello, can you hear me, Isabel?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you. So yes, I have a question. My question is framed and it channels 2 references from this very event. One from Major General Joe Singh, who referenced George Simon's beautiful paintings, The Shaman's Journey Along the Milky Way, The Shaman's Journey Along the Milky Way, and the comment made by Alfred Bulai that astronomy was the very first science. So my question, especially to the Guyanese on the panel, but to everybody, my question, have you made any links or studies or astrophotographies of the Amerindian sky stories, philosophies, and cosmology? That's my question, because I think it would be just so exciting and enriching. Thank you.
That's a good question.
I'm gonna respond since it's kind of central and targeting us. It's a terrific question, and you would be delighted, Vanda, to know that at least myself, I wish more people would be more like integral in that project that you described, which is super important. But I am in contact and communication with a young scholar who has studied Guyanese indigenous peoples and their culture and religion and astronomical view, but not in a more well, the astronomy side is not very in depth, but there is a rudimentary approach with his project. And I've made contact after reading a paper of his describing um, um, the religion of the indigenous peoples in their various communities in Guyana. So yeah, at least I am very much engaged in having that conversation and research, and I'm very much involved with at least one individual who is as passionate in that endeavor as well. So we're working on it.
Thank you. I'm going to relay one question from the feed, and then we've got a couple more pending with raised hands. And then we're going to start thinking about wrapping things up, and because we could go on forever. I mean, it is fascinating. So the question in the feed, which I think has just come through to me actually, is, and it's from Michael Passod. I was wondering if there are astral bodies that are in direct line of sight with each other, such that we cannot see the one behind visually. And if so, what technology would be used to see them? I think I understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I think in the chat, I actually put an answer for that.
Oh, great. Okay.
So everybody can see that. But very, very briefly, you get that occasional configuration where it was predicted by Albert Einstein, actually, from general relativity, that the gravitational field of the object in front acts as a lens. So it bends the light and you can see the object that's actually behind. But those have to be, I mean, it's a rare configuration. But typically, even in our entire picture of the Milky Way, there are regions that are dark because of the dust. It's actually blocking our sight.
Thank you. And we have Ronald, who's been waiting very patiently again to ask a question.
Thank you very much. One more question. One of the biggest challenges right now in the world when it comes to taking part in, we're picking up a hobby in astrophotography and stargazing, is light pollution. We all know that. And one thing Guyana is blessed with right now is dark skies. Well, our country is on a rapid pace of development, so a lot of infrastructure is being placed, and light pollution is becoming an issue right now, especially while I'm living in Region 3. I remember at an early age, I could clearly see the Milky Way, but now we're in the oil and gas industry, so the coastline right now is being developed by wharfs and et cetera, et cetera. So the light pollution has become a big issue right now. But we're still blessed with night sky. We could always go in a vehicle, drive for 15 minutes or 10 minutes, go in like how we call it a back dam to, get a clear view night sky. Don't you think that, especially in Caribbean, one of the main issue also too is getting funding to participate in astrophotography and giving education about astronomy, etc. Don't you think we should include in part of our tourism package? Because like we said, we have night skies, we have great spot like Santa Mission, the Rupununi, which is far away from light pollution. Don't you think we should include that in our tourism package to boost our tourism sector, which in the long run we will end up gaining revenue to invest back in our hobbies?
I'll take that one. I'm glad you mentioned that, Ronald. It's a superb analysis that you did there. The least that we can do, I mean, stargazers are a minority group. So if we want to preserve the night sky, we're gonna have to talk about it openly in the public. I've done my fair share on that. I've written letters to the newspapers on that specific issue. I've also discussed it with the certain tourism groups that are promoting Guyana. And I've introduced this concept of astrotourism, which is, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you described, we have wonderful dark skies, and people from, what we call the developed world, at least abroad internationally, as they're very light polluted. and they get away to go far away, far distances, and take their own telescopes and photography equipment to take snaps of gorgeous dark skies. So it is a real industry, and so it's an industry that we can tap into. But more to the matter, it is political by nature. We're going to have to press it openly and publicly. So I would encourage you to add your voice. Feel free to add your voice. Just write a letter to the newspaper, write a letter to the minister responsible, parliament, you name it. Let's get the discussion rolling.
I have one more question. All right, just one more question, right?
That's right. That's
What
good.
does a black hole? Yes, well, it's actually a joke. What does a black hole and COVID-19 have in common? They both sucks.
Clever.
All right, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronald. Okay, we have Galaxy Prime with a hand raised. This may be our final or penultimate question.
Hi everyone. A question of interest. I was just wondering, how do you actually determine the wavelengths of light, or in general, the size of an object seen from space?
Who's going to take that one?
David, can you handle that for us?
Okay, the simplest terms that I could provide, every bit of light that you see is composed of one or multiple wavelengths of light. Normally a spectral graph or a spectroscope, you generate a spectral graph that will clearly indicate the wavelengths that are present in the light that you're seeing. I wish I had some samples here that I could bring up. Well, I might have some samples here to bring up, but I'll need a couple of moments to do so. But normally a spectroscope, spectrograph, a device specifically designed to detect the wavelengths that are present in the light that you're seeing. That's what you would use. In terms of size, well, there are two ways that I can think of straight away. Of course, the visual reference, comparing what you see as physical dimensions of the objects, often in relation to others that may be of equal distance to where you're viewing from. That is the quickest and easiest way of determining the size of an object that you see. Other ways may require, and that's not even so much size, that is mass, how that body influences others near it. If of bigger objects with more mass, they will have more gravity that will pull more on the objects nearby. Smaller objects, the inverse will be true. Yeah, that's a way to suggested ways.
Okay, I would like to try and answer your question, but first, can you repeat the question because it was kind of complex and it's
Can
a
our
long
young
question.
scholar repeat the question?
Yeah, how do you actually determine the wavelength of light, or in general, the size of an object seen from space?
Okay, that's two very different questions. Now, in spectroscopy, if you image the spectrum of the light coming from the object, and you can identify at least one of the elements that is in the composition of the object, let's say hydrogen, you will see in the spectrum of the object, you will see the spectral line for the hydrogen missing. And so you would know that position is where the H alpha wavelength is. Now, depending on if the object is moving, you would see that missing wavelength shifted. Now, objects that are moving further away from us, they are red shifted, and that means they are shifted towards the red side of the spectrum. And objects moving closer to us, they're shifted to the blue side of the spectrum. Now, by determining the offset of where that spectral line is, you'll be able to determine how much the light is red shifted or blue shifted. And that shift can tell you how fast the object is moving away from you. If the object is moving away from you due to the expansion of the universe, you can extrapolate and determine how far away the object is that is moving away. Now, as opposed to the size of it, it can be a bit tricky, but if you are observing an object that is orbiting another object, you can use their mass and the theory of Newton's theory of gravity, or if it's like huge masses and they're moving at relativistic speeds, you can use general relativity to calculate. You use that and their velocities to calculate the mass of the objects.
And just to add, if you want more information, you can email admin@aagy.org. I will be more than willing to ensure you get more information.
Okay, may I share my screen now? Because I do have a pretty good example of what I was describing earlier.
Oh, certainly.
Okay. All right, so this is what a spectrograph looks like. So this is of the Orion Nebula. You actually would have seen quite a few samples of photos of the Orion Nebula as it looks through the camera, normal imaging. But a spectrograph will take that light and split it out. All the peaks that you see here represent peaks in wavelength. In the overall combined light, there's specific peaks that appear, and each one of these represents an element that's being detected in the gaseous nebula. So that is the real power of spectroscopy. You may just see a color, but how that color of light, for example, is comprised is an indication of the wavelengths that are present within that light. And depending on the nature of the object, those wavelengths could easily represent different elements that might be present within it. Because nebulae, they emit light. This is an example of an emission spectrum. Notice there's specific lines. It's not like a broadband spectrum. I'll try to bring up an example of a broadband spectrum of a star so you can see the difference there. Sirius is always a good example, right? So this is Sirius. And the spectrum is more continuous. There are dips here. Well, because the outer atmosphere of any star acts as a surface that will absorb portions of light that are passing through it. You will see these gaps in the overall spectrum. It's not purely continuous. These gaps are absorption lines. They also represent elements that are present within the star, well, at least the outer atmosphere of the star. And yeah, this is, again, very useful in determining how the star is comprised, what elements and what gases. I know what other materials will be present within the star or existing between the star, because remember, it's the case where the light from the star is passing through a material and some of that light is being absorbed. It's also true for any gaseous objects that may be present between the star and us. It could potentially absorb specific wavelengths, and that will indicate the elements that are present within that gas. Yeah. Okay, so that's my contribution.
Thank you very much, David. When you're ready, maybe stop sharing. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, I know we still have a couple of questions pending. If they're very quick, we can take them, and then that will be it. But you've been waiting so patiently. I haven't got the heart to to not answer. V Singh, what's your question?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Okay, my question is for Ferlin and Mahindra. As a Guyanese parent, the question is actually coming from my sister, who is the mother of the young lady that just asked the question. As a Guyanese parent who have no knowledge of astronomy, and have a child who is basically obsessed with astronomy to, well, I don't know as yet what she want to become, but how do I begin to support her in that field for her to have a career in that area?
Thank you very much for the question. you know, a lot of parents ask us the same thing. How can they get their kids more involved in astronomy? I think perhaps the best way to get them started is to buy them a telescope. Another way to get them started, there are many publications, books, a lot of content that you can get both online as well as you know, if you go into a bookstore, you can get that as well. That are very tailored to the age group of your child. How old is your child?
She is 16 years old.
Oh wait, she's your niece?
Yes, she's my
Oh,
niece.
sorry, I misheard. So 16 years old. Okay. So yeah, you can get her an introduction to astronomy guide. There are many simple books out there. You can, you know, find the popular ones published by the notable astronomers, Neil deGrasse Tyson and so on, Carl Sagan, the classics. And I would even encourage you to have her follow Dr. Hack's Facebook profile if she's on Facebook. Dr. Hack produces a lot of content for a wide range of audience. So, and of course, you know, there's our group. More than welcome to join us. We'll help.
Thank you.
And-
Okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
Miss V Singh, can you please email admin@aagy.org? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got we'll take a final question from Ariel.
Hi, good night, everybody. Actually, it's Atara on this account. Sorry about that, Berlin.
That's okay.
Actually, it's not a question, but rather an additional to the question that we had regarding the indigenous communities in Guyana and their astronomy. While I was in UG, I came into contact with an anthropologist in University of Guyana, but she mentioned that there was either a paper or book going or completed. I'm yet to follow up on that. I haven't got in contact with her to confirm, but there was a compilation being currently then done on I'm not too certain which tribe, indigenous tribe of Guyana, but one of them, they were working on compiling their cultural astronomical history. Although I'm not sure if it's published yet or not, but I'm trying to get on to her for a while now to get an update regarding that. So there's also that going on in Guyana, or rather finished. I'm not too certain about that. I will get back to Ferlin on that, and we can somehow update everyone.
Thanks a lot, Atar. Well, yeah, you do that.
Thank you. Did the panelists have any final comments that they wanted to make? Or are you all happy?
Yeah, I've been putting some materials into the chat section. I do have a YouTube channel. If you just search either 2 Minutes of Wonder or Dr. Sharon Hack, you can send in questions. I give you a shout out and we answer them for you. In addition, I work with young children, a 5-6-year-old. They send amazing questions and we answer it in a magical setting. And that's called the Enchanted Forest.
So, I would like to just, rather than try and wrap up, I'd like to just follow one theme that seems to have emerged quite strongly in the course of the... rather than try and wrap up, I'd like to just follow one theme that seems... Sorry. And that is the link between, and I'm sorry to take it from the regional perspective right down to the Guyanese one, but it struck me in the course of this, and I think this applies actually to any of the islands, is that this seems to be a pursuit that is best suited in some ways to the more remote parts of the country that don't suffer from light pollution, and we have a lot of those in Guyana. And I'm thinking particularly of our indigenous communities, for example, and all the kids who haven't been anywhere near a school for goodness knows how long, and so on and so forth. And it just seemed to me that when you were saying that, you know, astronomy combines science and maths and all these things, it would, and the fact that Mahendra's actually been able to build a telescope, I wonder if there's some way that we can find of having a very simple introduction that maybe we can give to either teachers or parents, as we had there, or even youngsters themselves, that they can then go out and look at the night sky and start, you know, make a start there. Because one thing you can see brilliantly in all these remote parts of Guyana is the night sky. I mean, we have, just in the audience we had tonight, we've got Vanda, who's got strong links to the interior. We've got Major General Joe Singh and others. It would be easy to make, you know, to form those links. And just such a lovely way for youngsters now maybe to engage with all sorts of topics, but just by learning a bit about astronomy. So just a final thought there. But it has been incredibly stimulating for those of us who know nothing about astronomy. And we can see from the questions and the level of engagement that the audience has really enjoyed it. So thank you very, very much to all the members of the panel for that, for their various contributions. And thank you, audience, for being so lively and engaged. It's been a wonderful evening. I hope you all have a pleasant rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
All right. Gonna say goodbye. I'm going to stop the live feed now.